Hi, and welcome everyone to Ethereal Encounters Unveiled. Today we are broadcasting live on the United Public Radio Network and the UFO Paranormal Radio Network, 105.3 on the Gulf Coast and 107.7 FM in beautiful New Orleans. Hello, everyone. I'm so super excited to be here live on a Friday. Thank you so very much for joining us. And just to reiterate, thank you again for joining us. This is Ethereal Encounters Unveiled. Today, we're broadcasting live on the United Public Radio Network and the UFO Paranormal Radio Network, which is 105.3 on the Gulf Coast and 107.7 FM in New Orleans. Please join us in one of the various chat rooms. We're streaming all over social media so that you can connect with our guest today. And I'm so excited to be able to speak with him. This topic is so intriguing. And I want to just say, prepare yourself to have an entire concept of geology and history turned upside down. We're here today to explore a forbidden narrative, which is the Earth itself is a colossal fossil. Isn't that great? Our guest today is an independent researcher, Mike Wilkerson. He pioneers in the field of biogeology, arguing that our mountains and canyons are not products of slow erosion, but the petrified remains of ancient, unimaginable, huge biosphere. He'll take us into a world of gigantic trees that covered all of the continents, the literal corpses of mythological titans, and the global catastrophe that triggered their transformation and rapid petrification. He connects ancient myths to physical reality and argues that the process of rapid petrification reset our world and that our history has been deliberately obscured. So, with that, let me welcome Michael. How are you?
I'm doing great. Hi. Nice
Hi.
to meet you, Caroline, and thank you for the invite.
Oh, I'm
It
thrilled
was
to
a good
have
summary,
you.
and I like that colossal fossils. That's great.
Yeah, that was cool, right?
I'm a
I like
fan of
rhyming.
alliteration, so that works for me.
Good. Yeah, I mean, I've seen a lot of your videos and I've just been kind of enthralled by the topic in and of itself. And I said, oh my gosh, I hope I can get him on the show. And thank you so much for being here. And hello to everyone. We're going to be saying hello. Hi, Carrie. How are you? Who's this? Hi, Annette. So good to have you. And who else do we have? Oh, I'm not going to pronounce that. New Jersey girl. Hi, how you doing? We're going to get people popping in. I always like to say hello to folks as they pop in. So let's get started. Tell us about yourself. Give us a little bit of your backstory, how you got into or how this topic found you. Like, what started your passion for this?
Well, it goes back about 10 years. I mean, I've always been interested in questioning mainstream narratives on all sorts of levels, but about 10 years ago, a friend of mine got me questioning things like Earth shape. And initially, I thought it was an absurd idea, and I just dismissed it multiple times before I figured, okay, now I've got to go and debunk this ridiculous idea. And the more I got into it, looking at the moon landings and the evidence that was completely lacking for those, and just examining everything from the ISS to the claims that are made about space and all the things that have been done by the space agencies, I found most of that information to be completely lacking in any kind of substance. So it was that really that got me questioning things and coming to the conclusion that, well, if something as big as the Earth itself might not be what we were taught, then what else should be re-examined? And so I've come to the conclusion that all of the ologies in one way or another are compromised, and that the academic system itself is a system of control, and they're controlling our minds, they're controlling narratives, and so I've always been somebody who really likes to question things, and I'm not afraid to address the unquestionables, which are certain things like earth shape and others that you're not allowed to even ponder that, because the science was settled hundreds of years ago, and you have to be a complete idiot to even give that idea its day in the sun. And that's just not how my brain works. I like to look at the evidence and see what's there. So I moved to Europe in '97 as an exchange student. I studied in Italy, got a bachelor's degree, and then eventually moved to Sweden, where I lived another 10 years, and I studied to be a chiropractor, which is what I do now. I work on the Costa Blanca in Spain as a chiropractor. And so that, without having any idea that would be the case, really prepared me for what I'm doing now, because having studied a lot of anatomy and histology, which is the study of tissues, when I started to get onto the subject that maybe geology might not be exactly what we were taught, I started to recognize that there were a lot of seemingly anatomical features in stone that shouldn't be there. And so that's kind of how it all began for me.
Fascinating. I mean, I've watched other YouTubers show a lot of evidence saying the same, and it's always fascinated me. And I agree with you wholeheartedly. Not to be a conspiracy theorist, but I am one, because I too disagree with so much of what we've been told, from space all the way to Earth to what's going on here. And I can't help but always ask why, like why, and then I go, well, it's about power and money. It's got to be about control, power, and money. Those have to be the reasons why. And it's okay if other people think we're crazy. That's fine. I mean, that's how I believe. Like, you can believe whatever you want, but the evidence you show is just mind blowing.
Hmm.
It
Thank you.
truly is. Like, if you deny it, like, you have to have cognitive dissonance, because it's just too real to be not real. So I wanted to get started with what you mentioned about the shape of the earth. What's the deal with that? Why have we been lied to about? I mean, is the earth flat? I had flat earth
How
mic
many
on, and
hours
I
do
was
we have here?
right, right. We have 2.
uh,
We have 2. Go
two
for it.
hours. All right. Well, oh gosh, what aspect of it? It's such a gargantuan topic, and a lot of people, if you go looking on YouTube, you're just going to get a bunch of propaganda. It's
Yeah.
Tjenare. She's from Sweden, so yeah. So I'm not even sure where to begin with that, other than there's a lot of empirical evidence which suggests that things aren't what we were taught. We're
Mhm.
told that there's a certain size to the Earth, and there's a curvature to that size, and that's something that, if you know geometry, and you can calculate, and you can determine how much curvature there should be over a given distance. And
Mhm.
there are loads and loads of distance proofs that completely debunk the narratives we're told about size. Um, People seeing things that are hundreds of miles away, which should be categorically impossible, because at that distance, the drop should be so much
Absolutely.
that huge mountains should be below the horizon. Uh, Things like gas pressure existing without a barrier, that can't be replicated in a scientific experiment. It's something that we experience here because we live in a pressurized system. It can be measured with barometric pressure. And so we're told that we're on a ball that's spinning and floating in the infinite vacuum of space, and yet our atmosphere never gets sucked away. And their explanation for that is the magic of gravity, and that there's a gravitational gradient that gets weaker and weaker the further you get from the Earth. And then there's this magic Goldilocks zone where suddenly you're in the infinite vacuum of space.
Yeah.
And yet we're shooting rockets up, which should be disrupting that equilibrium. Just like if you were to poke a balloon from the inside out, with the
Mhm.
pin, the balloon is going to burst. You can't keep that gas pressure in without a barrier. It defies the laws of thermodynamics. So
Yeah.
things like this, come up. And then if you dig into it, you can't go to YouTube. You have to go to other places to find your information, like
Yeah.
BitChute or Rumble and censorship resistant platforms. Then
Right.
you can find all the blooper reels, all the mistakes that NASA has made throughout the
Yeah.
years, of which there are thousands and thousands. Harness fails, green screen glitches, bubbles in
Mhm.
space because they're practicing everything underwater. All kinds of different Hollywood trickery that's been used and thoroughly exposed by not just flat earthers, but moon landing deniers and just space skeptics in general. So, and then when you just start to look for really basic, simple evidence that what they're claiming is true, you find it wanting. There's like, why don't we have a 24-hour live stream from space of the Earth where you can match up the weather that you're experiencing where you are on Earth with what is being seen from above? Nothing like that exists. And they claim that they're doing that with the ISS. And what you have is a fisheye lens that is grossly over exaggerating the curvature of the Earth. It couldn't possibly be that much curvature from 250 miles away, which is what they claim the ISS is floating around at. And it just magically floats in this bendy, space-time thing where it's just falling perpetually around the Earth for decades without ever degrading and crashing into the Earth. And so it's just, I mean, that's kind of a short summary of
Oh, that was
there's there's
excellent.
a there's a lot of
Oh,
problems with the globe model. I don't identify as a flat earther. I identify as a globe skeptic. I think that flat versus globe is a false dichotomy that is designed to get people arguing amongst themselves,
and it
you know,
does.
and and then they straw man it, and they present all these images of like a pizza floating in space, and they're
Mm,
mixing models when in reality flat earth is the original model, in the sense that all of the ancient cosmologies were
that's right.
what you would call the cosmic egg cosmologies, where you have a sphere, but we're on the inside on a disk in the center of that sphere. And all of the ancients believe that. So, were they primitives that just didn't have all the scientific tools at their disposal to really determine the nature of their reality, or have we been bamboozled? And I think that that's the case.
Yeah.
And then the question is why? Power, money, you mentioned before. I think it's far deeper than that. I think they're divorcing us from the true knowledge about the nature of our realm in every single way. And this includes matters of health and politics and everything.
Wow.
So it's really, I think, fundamentally a spiritual battle that's being waged, and
Yeah.
it's being waged in our minds. And we have this matrix overlay that we're all experiencing now through the screens. And with AI, it's becoming increasingly difficult to determine what is reality. So when I started to look into this stuff 10 years ago, I became very interested in empirical reality, the outside
Mm,
world. What can I go and look at? I made observations here in Spain, looking off the coast to Ibiza on a clear winter's day, and I could see the entire island, and it's 90 kilometers away, 60
wow.
miles. At that distance, 200 meters of the island should be obscured behind the curve. And
Right.
with my phone, I took a photograph, and I can prove that the entire island is there because there are landmarks. There's a saddle between two peaks, and I know the height of the saddle, and I know how much of that saddle should be obscured behind the curve, and none of it is. So these are problems for the globe model. If you make
Yeah.
observations that are way too far away, then the math is off on the size of the globe. And if the math is off on the size of the globe, then all of their gravitational computations for
Right.
slingshotting things around the Earth and the moon and whatever, so they can get their rovers to Mars,
Yeah.
all of that goes out the window as well. It's dependent on the size that they've given us and the gravitational pull that they tell us it has. And so if we're seeing way too far and they come up with this excuse that, well, maybe it's just bigger than we were taught. If you double the size of something, you're exponentially increasing the volume, which would mean
Mhm.
that we would have a much greater gravitational pull than what we're told we should have. So those are just some, you know, some talking points on
Yeah.
the subject, but it's really, to really wrap your head around it, it's probably about a 6-month investigation. I mean, some people just believe it right away, but it's better to really dig into things and determine whether there's substance to the arguments and where's the evidence for and against,
Yeah.
and it's all in
Isn't
favor
Are you
of,
still there? You kind of
I'm still here. You froze.
Yeah, but it buffered. It buffered. It's been
There we go.
doing that, I think. AWS was down all week, so I think there's some kind of internet glitchy stuff going on, or maybe the topic. Maybe it's the topic. But
Yeah.
isn't that the same theory with the Panama Canal that it wasn't designed with curvature in mind?
Yeah,
I heard
that's one of
that.
many examples. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
yeah, we see too far, and water always lays flat when it's undisturbed, and it
right,
requires a container, otherwise it will pour.
right.
And so we use levels to make perfectly structured buildings using water because it has that quality. And
Yeah,
so, if it's not curving over a given distance, then it would have to have twice the curvature over the next given distance. And that's
right,
not how water works. We don't have lumpy oceans unless there's,
right.
agitation. Um, so, yeah, that's
What's your opinion on how this lie could be perpetrated on such a massive scale?
that's a
It would
great
mean Yeah,
yeah, that's a great question, because most people will default to this couldn't possibly be true because so many different people could not possibly keep such a profound secret for so long. And
mhm,
I mean, obviously, the globe model came in with the Jesuits in the Vatican back in what, the
right,
1500s or something,
mhm,
Galileo and Copernicus and all of that.
yeah,
But the when you get into a deeper understanding of the power structures of the world, you find out that we have both secret and non-secret societies that are running the show. You
yeah,
have you have royals, you have the Vatican, you have all of these, the Illuminati family lines, and all these things, of which thousands of books have been written. But fundamentally, secret societies are hierarchical. You have different levels, and you go through different rites and rituals in order to achieve higher levels, and then you get to know more and more. So it's a pyramid, and it's only the people at the top that really have all the pieces of the puzzle. And so when you look at corporations, same thing. When you look at the
yeah,
military industrial complex, same thing. When you look at the intelligence agencies, same thing. So if you know about all the secret societies and all of the different, intelligence agencies and how they work, and all the dirty tricks that they've used for since their inception, it's easier to understand. But if you haven't really picked that apart, then it's easy to default to, well, there couldn't possibly be so many people in on it. A lot of things don't require a lot of people. Like, some people have dug into 9/11. If 9/11, is a grand hoax, it didn't have to be a huge number of people involved, because once again, you've got compartmentalization and need to know. Same thing with the moon landings. The people at mission control that are sitting behind their computers probably don't have a clue that what they're doing is fake, because they're practicing with simulations all the time, and then ultimately there's this bottleneck of the central computer that's running everything, that can feed them a simulation, and they wouldn't know the difference. So I think
ah,
most people that are involved in these agencies are good people that have good intentions and think they're doing great work that's for the benefit of humanity, but ultimately they're probably tools for deception, because they're
yeah.
bolstering up false paradigms that are, destructive to our worldview in a whole variety of ways.
That's such a great point. I mean, even if you look at the video of the astronauts that came back after the moon landing, it was just you can just look at that and see on their faces, just read, their faces. You can tell they were holding something back as if it were a big lie. They looked so unhappy. I don't think three men would look that way after doing such a monumental journey. And,
Look
it
at look at
yeah,
how sports people celebrate after a victory. You know,
right,
it's like
exactly.
they look like they're at their own funerals, and I highly recommend people watch that
Oh,
because
yeah.
and then there's a funny thing happened on the way to the moon,
Yep.
and Astronauts Gone Wild by Bart Sibrel. There are
He's
literally
great.
thousands and thousands of videos dissecting the lies and trickery of not just NASA but SpaceX and all of the spacefaring nations. And that gets into another important point of the power structures is when you start to dig into this stuff, it reveals as well that there's a collusion of all of the spacefaring nations are in collusion for the space fakery. But these are countries that are supposedly at odds geopolitically with each other. Like, why would they all like agree
Exactly.
to
Unify on that.
keep that a secret? And why
Yeah,
wouldn't someone expose someone else? And the same goes
exactly.
for the Antarctic Treaty. You've got this thing that's going back to, I don't know, the 40s or the 50s, that it's one of the only treaties that's never been broken, and all of these countries that are at odds are in agreement that we shouldn't go down and disturb the ice or the penguins. It's like, maybe there's something that they're hiding down there, and there's a
Yeah.
reason that it's so hard for the average person to get there.
I always said if I get a tattoo, it's gonna be, "They think we're stupid." That's gonna be my tattoo. Because I really believe that they think we're stupid. And I think that's why you're hearing so much about the Great Awakening too. We're supposedly having and I remember in the 90s and the 80s, there was this Great Awakening back then too. And then it kind of quells down. But now it seems to be because of the internet, obviously, that a lot of people are kind of waking up to this nonsense and they're seeing a lot of the lies. It seems like they feed us one truth followed by a lie. That seems to be like the catch. They give us a little bit of truth and then it's followed by a pack of lies. So,
A lot of events have multiple lies built into them so that
mhm,
people are squabbling amongst themselves about what the truth of the event was. um, so yeah, discernment is a tough thing, but I think in
yeah.
general, if people operate from the assumption that they're lying to us almost all the time, and that becomes their default, they're going to be right most of the time, and
Mm,
that's a lot better than believing the lies.
yeah.
I've said
Yeah.
many times that during 2020, being a conspiracy theorist or a truther and exercising discernment became a matter of life and death, quite
Yeah.
literally.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
they've mocked the conspiracy theorists for years, but chemtrails proven true in courts and congressional testimony,
Absolutely.
and fluoride in the water now being removed from multiple states,
Yeah.
like mercury toxicity. It just goes on and on. And especially when you look into the medical world, it's like every drug that was ever deemed to be safe and effective, that was ever pulled from the market was once deemed to be safe and effective. And you know, it's really, we're in the apocalypse now, and I don't mean that in a biblical sense, but the real wording of the real meaning of the word apocalypse is the unveiling.
Right.
And there's so much that's being unveiled right now, and it's a wonderful time. They're doing their best to squash it, but
Yeah.
I think they let the cat out of the bag when they locked everyone in for 10 weeks,
Yeah.
during COVID. And a whole lot of people are just like, something was tickling their brains, going, this doesn't feel
Something
right.
ain't
And
right.
they started looking into stuff, and so they basically birthed a whole wave of conspiracy theorists by doing that. And hopefully, I mean, I'm so uh the opposite of disheartened. I'm heartened by the comment threads. I mean, I'm on so many platforms, and when I go look at a post that I'm like, this is absolutely ridiculous. 10 years ago, when I started this truth or journey on these topics, I
Mm,
was like the only one in the threads. And now
wow.
you struggle on many of these comments to find a single comment that's in support of whatever the narrative is. They're like thousands. I posted something the other day that was, they were talking about masks and another round and the latest booster and all that, and literally it was like 11,000 laughing faces versus
Wow.
250 likes. I'm like, Yes.
Yeah, that's
We're,
great.
that's happening more and more, all over X and these other platforms. It's just like people are they're
They
not
are.
buying the
They are.
they're not buying the bullshit
And I'll
anymore.
tell you something, I'm not even going to give my dog the next round of rabies because I saw a whole video, read an article to make sure it was real that they're using mRNA technology in the poor dog's rabies shots, and a lot of them are dropping dead and getting really sick from it. So that's not gonna happen either for my poor dog. Like, it's
Yeah.
disgusting.
Yep, it's definitely something you wanna, look into
Yeah,
deeply. I'm amazed that there are people that still haven't, and they're just believing whatever the black mirror in their living room is telling them.
true. But, it's kinda sad, and I call myself an apocalyptimist like Mark Atwood
I like that
because
one.
yeah, it's great because, it's very telling, like, I don't think, it's the end by any means, not now anyway, but I think they're gonna get us regardless because they infected our food, our air, the water. So, they wanna put vaccines into lettuce. I mean, it's just absurd, into the food supply. So I think they're just so whoever they are, this group of demonic people, whatever they are, they're just determined. And, we just have to keep
Black
fighting.
magicians.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's very satanic and very dark. And I think it's very important for folks to know that there is this darkness and you don't have to dwell in it, but you have to know it's out there and be awakened to it and be aware.
There wouldn't be such a concerted effort if we weren't incredibly powerful, each and every one
Yeah.
of us. So think of the apparatuses in place to try and keep us asleep to our true nature and to keep us from coming together collectively to fight
Yeah.
off the baddies. I like to give people glimmers of hope. I coined the term prospiracy to
Mm,
counter conspiracy, because when you
that's a
start to
good
go
one.
down these rabbit holes,
Yeah.
some of them leave you feeling totally empowered. Like for people who are afraid of viruses, I highly recommend they look into the no virus doctors.
Yeah.
There are some incredible doctors, people like Andrew Kaufman, people
Yep.
like Tom Cowan. He's not a doctor, but Alex Zech's work is incredible. I can recommend the work of Mark Gober, who's written 7 books on they're called the Upside Down series, an end to the upside down cosmology, an end to upside down medicine, an end to the upside down reset. He's a legend. And so
Mm,
when you start to dig into this, you start to realize that they've actually never isolated any virus properly using the scientific method. Koch's postulates have never been fulfilled. So they haven't actually even proven the existence of the pathogen. In my opinion, they delivered poison as cure for a pathogen never proven to exist, proven proven by a faulty test, and that's what happened, in my opinion. And
yeah. And
so
that's why I like
that's a
Telegram.
and that and
Telegram.
that's a
Yeah.
that's a prospiracy, in the sense that once you've really
Yeah.
gone into that and you really understand what's being said, you're no longer afraid of that. I mean, yeah, you could be
Right.
afraid of toxic jabs, but you're not going to be afraid of, like, someone sneezed near me yesterday and I might come down with something. Like, it's a deep, profound subject. Nuclear power is another one. You could go down that rabbit hole, and suddenly you're not worried about that anymore. It doesn't mean there aren't big bombs. Clearly there are.
Mhm.
Asteroid strikes, if you get into the earth shape thing, you're not worried about, NASA's every week, oh, we're tracking another one. And that's the whole justification for why we
Yeah.
need the space programs, because we have to get off this rock, otherwise we're going to get destroyed like the dinosaurs did.
Right.
That's another one, dinosaurs. It's just like, it's one thing after another. When you start to look into them,
Yeah.
it just doesn't hold water.
Yeah, it's really sad, and that's one of the reasons I like Telegram because I follow, like, Dr. Lee, what's her name? She's so good. She came up with a no theory virus thing that there's really no, what's on Lee Merritt. You ever heard of her? She's
Mm-mm.
really good, and she also is working. She's been a doctor her whole life, orthopedic surgeon, worked in the army, and she came up with also proof that the virus is fake news. I mean, these are our opinions, and I think we're allowed to have them. And I'm not afraid to talk about this stuff. Like people go, "Oh, they're going to shut your channel down." Let them. It's funny because those two words have been really prevalent this year. Just let them. Let them do what they do because we're going to keep doing what we do, right?
Yeah, well, the censorship of the doctors. I mean, this isn't how the scientific method works. You should be able to debate theories
Yes.
and like, okay, bring the evidence in favor of what your claims
Right.
are. And none of that happened. They just it was a unilateral shutdown of any dissenting voices through COVID, and that should clue people in to the fact that it was just one narrative, and
Yeah,
they should understand that this was a very, very systematic, widespread operation
it was.
that people need to wake up
Yeah, and it
and
still
quick.
is. It
Mm,
still is. I mean, the UN and the WHO just approved mRNA technology. I'm like, why are they still harping on this after all the proof
mm.
that's coming out? I mean, and
Trump
we
just
love to
got a
ask why,
booster.
right? Right.
Bragging about his latest one, Mr.
I
Operation
know.
Warp Speed. All the lockdowns happened under him. The MAGA people need to wake up too, because they are
We all
so
do.
bamboozled by him. He's a wolf in sheep's clothing, big
I
time,
don't
in my
know. I
opinion.
When I saw his health report last week or the week before, and it said he was given both his flu shot and COVID, I just couldn't. I was just stunned by that. I don't know. I don't
Follow
know.
the money.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. But I wanted to
Yeah.
also talk to you about two things that I think kind of go with this theme. Before we get into your awesome slides, you have some ready for us too to show, right?
Oh,
Like you
sure.
did.
I can do.
Yeah, when we
I can do multi-hour presentations, but
Oh, I
it's good to have
know.
some dialogue as well. Otherwise, it's just me going
No,
through slides. So
absolutely. But I
yeah.
wanted to ask you about the firmament and all right, we could and then the mud floods because I think this kind of all connects to like Tartarian uh empire
Without a
and
doubt.
all that great
Yeah.
stuff. So maybe you can take it whichever direction you
Yeah.
want to go. But
Well, we can start with that because that's kind of where it begins. Let
yeah,
me share screen here, and entire screen, second one with
there's
audio.
so many great comments too. We're going to have to get to them later when you're done because people are just buzzing away with so much great stuff and I don't want to miss it. So folks, I love the fact that you're all in here. Thanks to Mike too. And I thank you all for your incredible comments. I'm trying to read them as you're doing your thing.
Now, I
Maybe we could
think
pop
when I
this one up.
share audio on my screen, it might make an echo if you're talking.
All right, I'll
So,
I'll be quiet.
well, you're welcome to talk, but I just a warning.
Okay.
Or actually, I can just share hold on. Let me stop sharing, and then I'll just share a particular window, um, which is, there we go. Start.
And while you're doing that, I would appreciate it if folks can head on over to YouTube or Rumble and find me Ethereal Encounters Unveiled because these are like my personal channels aside from the network channels. If you could give me a follow, I'd greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Okay, so there we go. PowerPoint slide, also share audio. That should solve the problem with the, now I can't see you, but okay. So yeah, you mentioned mud floods. We can start there. That was a big one for me. This whole there's a whole bunch of different rabbit holes that are all have a tremendous amount of substance. Hold on, I'm going to turn off. There are. Let's see here. It's got
You should
subtitles.
have.
There we go.
Oh, there's the echo.
All right.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, there's an echo.
Yep. No worries though.
Though. All right. Yeah. So mud floods, star forts, Grand Tartary, World's Fairs, orphan trains, dirigibles, these giant blimps. There's just a ton of different different things that actually dovetail. It sounds like a whole bunch of harebrained theories, but when you look into them, they go beautifully with one another. And so anyway, reality, can you hack it? And I just the reason I chose that title is because of a book that I just published last month called The Hacker Prince, which is chronicling my adventures as a hacker in the 80s. I was the first hacker in the world to go to jail for the crime of hacking, which is a strange thing to say, but it's the fact. So anyway, that was the title. These are the things we were talking about before: the unquestionables, and just the idea that space is not what we were taught, and you really should look into it if you haven't. So then along the way, I saw these two videos, which really covered the topic of this idea that some of these, do you see my cursor when I move it around?
Yes, yes.
Okay. That these plateau mountains that look like tree stumps might actually have once been tree stumps. And we've been blinded to this. I coined the term paradigm blindness because each one of us has been taught a worldview that we've grown up believing, and we have narratives about how these mountains have formed that have to do with tectonic activity and whatnot. I'll go into that a little bit more. But there are loads of structures around the world that look like trees. And the main narrative is that things laid down in layers because of dead plant and animal life, and then those layers compressed into harder and harder layers, and then the tectonic activity is shifting that upward, and that's how we get our mountains. And a lot of mountains just don't make any sense when you look at it from just a logical perspective, and this one being a prime example. It's got a very stump-like look to it, but it also has concentric rings. So the question is, how could those concentric rings come about if we're dealing with a layering that's building up over time? It doesn't make sense. So we mentioned mythology before. You've got legends, you've got myths, you've got fairy tales, you've got ancient religious texts. The book, the Bible itself, had many books removed, the apocryphal texts like the book of Jasher and the book of Enoch, where they talk about these giant beings, not just giants, but beings the size of mountains. And then we also have these narratives that have to do with instant petrification. You see Perseus is holding up Medusa's head to try and petrify this mountainous sized creature called the Kraken. So I was always fascinated by these tales as a kid. Paul Bunyan, the giant lumberjack, but I never dreamed for a moment that they might actually be real things. And then a lot of people are sharing photographs like this, and they're claiming that this is unequivocal evidence that these beings once existed and they turned to stone. And I think some of the sites are very compelling and worthy of further investigation, but there never is any follow-up investigation with these sites. It's always just a single picture from a single angle, where they're not really taking into account the fact that foliage might be playing a role, or the shadows and how they're falling at the time of day and that sort of thing. There are some sites like this one that I think are definitely worthy of further investigation, because you have these caves exactly where the eye sockets should be if this were a titanic being that's lying down. But a lot of people are seeing faces and landscapes and just assuming that because they see the face that it must have been a Titan, and it might look totally different from other directions. So I caution people to jump too hastily to conclusions and to actually do some investigation. That there's a term called pareidolia, which is this recognition of something that doesn't actually necessarily exist, like seeing faces in knots in wood or in the clouds. And but then you have sites like this, which I found very compelling. And this is kind of how my whole research began, because there's a mountain here in Spain that looks just like an elephant, and it's right in this town that I live in. So I watched this video by J Dreamers where he was synthesizing a lot of these different ideas, and he showed these pictures. This is an island in Maui, or not Maui, but in Hawaii. I think it's off the coast of Maui. This is a place in Iceland. I think this is pareidolia because from lots of different angles, it doesn't look like an elephant. But this one is pretty interesting because you can get on Google Earth and look at it from a lot of different angles, and it still has that elephant shape. So is it just random chance or what? Well, mainstream science tells us that's not possible because the creatures would be so big that they would collapse under their own weight due to gravity, and that their bones wouldn't be able to support their weight. And so this is based on Einsteinian gravity, which is a bending of space-time. And we talked about this before, which is that as you scale volume up, or as you scale diameter up, the volume increases exponentially. So that's why they're saying that these creatures would have just collapsed under their own weight. And but if gravity isn't what we were taught, I mean, things obviously go down. The question is why, and do we need to attribute it to this unproven theory of Einstein, or is there some other more plausible explanation? There's no time to go into that, but so all of these things are interesting. They do dovetail, like I was saying, and I think that we really need to keep an open mind and understand that it's not one or the other. A lot of people are like, all of the mountains in the world were once giant trees, or all of this was that. And as soon as you use the word all, it really creates problems, because I think there's lots of different scenarios that we're looking at. So I think that this kind of investigation is really, it's a way of exiting the rabbit hole, because you're willing to look at things that we're taught are absurd and to give them their day in the sun. So I'm just kind of going through these in order, but is there specific things that you would like me to touch on? Because I've got so many slides here, there's not enough time to even begin to cover them. I can just bounce around if you like, or if there's something specific you'd like me to cover.
Yeah, we're good on time. I thought maybe we should start with the mud floods area.
Yeah, so there is so much evidence that our entire history has been rewritten, and that there was once a worldwide realm that people refer to as Tartaria. But that's just for lack of a better term. We don't know what they called themselves, but the traces of it are found all over the world. This building here, for example, was in, let's see, I want to say St. Louis, I believe. That was the St. Louis World's Fair. And they tell this was made of wood and plaster of Paris, and that they built it in like a year, and then they burned it down 6 months after the World's Fair. These kind of narratives repeat themselves all over the realm, as do great floods and the burying of buildings. And there's lots of photographic examples of them excavating away from the buildings, and then they're seeing facades like 2 and 3 and 4 floors below the ground level. So clearly there was a major cataclysm. It was realm wide. We have all of the flood myths of the ancients. The mainstream scientific narratives talk about 5 great dyings off, and the last of them being 65 million years ago with the dinosaurs, when they got whacked in the head. And so, we're given this story, the Big Bang. Everything came from nothing in an instant for reasons we don't know why. All of those particles bounced around together, and then gas, which normally disperses, suddenly decided to coalesce into nebulas that give birth to stars. And then those stars supernova out into the universe, and that's how the planets eventually form. And then we're given timelines of 16 billion years for the universe, and then 4.6 billion years for the age of the Earth. And they know that because they can look at the layers of the strata, and they know how far back this went, and then they look at the fossils as well. But there's also circular reasoning that's happening, where they tell us how old the fossils are based on the layer they're in, and then they tell us how old the layer is based on the fossils that are found in it. So this is called the petrogenesis cycle, which is where stone comes from. And it's very simplistic, and obviously geology itself is anything but simplistic, and there are thousands of different disciplines just within the ology. But the basic idea is that dead animal and plant life compressed into sedimentary layers. That compression became so great, and the heat involved in the compression, that it led to firmer rock known as metamorphic rock, like our marble. And then we have magma at the core of the earth, and they give us all these pictures of, of the earth's mantle and all the different layers, and they know exactly what the earth's composition is, all the way down to its molten iron spinning core. But yet we've never dug deeper than 8 miles in the history of humanity. And that took them 20 years to do in Russia, the Kola borehole. So there's a lot of trust me bro stuff, but they've got their scientific instruments, and they can tell us exactly this, that, or the other thing. And then the question is, can they really, or is it just a claim? So this is just a better example of the cycle of petrogenesis. So I coined the term biogeology as a way of distinguishing from the mainstream geological narratives. So if there's a far more direct approach, connection between biology and geology than what we were taught, then I thought that would be a great term to denote that distinction. And so I'm of the mind that many of the stones that we see around the world were former biology, whether it was plant life or tree or actual beings, mammals, that sort of thing. And I think they came in all sorts of sizes. When it comes to the tree topic, this is one of the most popular things to point to, which is Devil's Tower, which obviously looks a lot like a tree stump. It's a hotly contested subject, but the mainstream narratives on how this formed is that it happened over a 50 million year period of time, where magma pushed upward, and it was the earth was up here. So Devil's Tower is something like 1,000 feet tall. I can't remember exactly, but the earth was originally above that, and as the magma pushed up through the earth, there was a rapid cooling event, something like what froze the mammoths in Siberia, right? This rapid instant cooling. And what they're saying is that with this rapid cooling, the lava had nowhere to go, and so that pressure led to this honeycomb pattern that you see. And these kinds of structures exist all over the world. And we'll get back to those in a moment. But I think a lot of truth is hidden in plain sight, and Hollywood gives us these narratives like Avatar, where it's in another world where the bad humans are coming to mine the unobtainium, and they don't give a crap about the indigenous peoples. And I think really this is just truth in plain sight about what happened once upon a time in our realm. And the ancients had views of the world more like this. This is Yggdrasil, which is the Norse mythology, where they talk about the world tree, which in some myths was eventually cut down. And then you get these old maps that show this 4-continent system at the North Pole. So if you think of the Earth as more like a pizza than a ball, this would be at the center of it, and then you would have all these other continents around. So they talk about multiple spheres and the luminaries moving around in the spheres, but the basic idea is that the ancients had this cosmic egg model that they were all following, and we live on the disk inside of that. Now, I'm not claiming that to be the case. I think, like I said, it's a false dichotomy before, that it's neither a globe or flat. It's a combination of the two. And I tend to lean towards toroid, because this is the master shape that manifests throughout all of existence. Our hearts do this. Magnets do this. We see this in the vortexing of water, and we would be living on this green line, which is known as the accretion disk. And if seen from above, it looks like the flower of life. So this is what lava does. This is what it looks like. Never a straight line. Flows and it cools. We can watch it happening. We can see it come out of the mountains. But what we never see it do is this. But the claim is that this came from that. And I really challenge the notion just based on these pictures alone, because here you have that honeycomb pattern, but then you have a larger honeycomb pattern. This is exactly how the fibers of plants and different things grow. Also our fascia, the muscle fibers in our body, it does this sort of thing. So this has a very biological look to me. And even if you bought the narrative, how can you explain this slope here? Like it's going to come up and cool rapidly, and then it's, they'd probably tell you it was carved by a glacier or something, but then why wasn't that? So then you get all this curves, these lines going different direction, which has a very biological look to it. And even if you don't buy that, then I would say, how does this come about? Right. That's a lot harder to explain given their rapid cooling model.
What are we looking at here?
These are just different geological sites around the world. As far as what that was originally, I can't tell you, but I would lean far more towards biology than what we've been taught about how things are forming geologically. But given time, they'll come up with some far-fetched explanation for how this came about, and said with authority and some letters after your name, most people will believe it.
Yeah.
And then if you buy the narrative with the honeycomb, how do you explain this central portion in each one of these? It doesn't make sense, based on that simplistic explanation. And then we get into these kinds of structures, which are far more complex and harder to explain, given those simple petrogenesis models that I mentioned before. So this has a very biological look to it. Almost looks like flesh, muscle, or something. These look like almost cellular structures. I'll show a video of that site in a moment. And then you have all kinds of anomalous geological finds. This one being one of the weirdest that I've seen. You can see all the micro layering in this rock that continues up and then permeates this very biological looking structure. So how the heck does that come about with dead animal and plant life just laying down over millions of years of time? It makes zero sense. And so when it comes to biogeology, I think that some things are self-evident and they actually are what they appear to be, but we've been blinded by the paradigm we've been given, so we don't see it, and so we just trust the experts on these things. But if you look at that site,
can I ask you a quick question? Is that where red Himalayan comes from?
Well, there's salt mines found all over the world, and I'll show pictures of those in a little bit later on.
Okay.
But yeah, no, I don't think that particular site would be where they would get it from. But you'll see the salt mines later on. But
I'm saying like that red, almost like blood. Is that really where they manifest this from, or is that just like?
Yeah, there's a lot of questions about what are these salt mountains and salt mines. And I'll show images. I believe they were former tree. A lot of people think that there were Titan muscle. But I think the evidence in favor of tree is very compelling, and I'll show that. So this is the layering thing, and it's like, okay, all these different layers, that makes sense, but the narrative falls apart when you find out that this structure seen in this photograph was formed in about 3 to 6 hours when Mount St. Helens erupted. So let me know if you can hear the audio here.
As the grains were being propelled over the surface in a slurry, the particles separated coarse and fine into thin layers. I had thought that a catastrophe would mix up all the particles and make a homogenized deposit. Boy, was I wrong. Right here, a pyroclastic flow moving at freeway speed or higher can separate particles into coarse and fine. So layering doesn't require millions of years, thousands of years, or even hundreds of years. It can form rapidly in this slurry flow process. So Mount St. Helens tells us something really interesting about how rapidly strata can form. There's even micro-thin lamination in this deposit. It's remarkable.
So that's pretty compelling. There were also trees that petrified very quickly after that happened. So we'll get into different theories about petrification and the different ways in which things can petrify. But this is how it all began for me. This is the mountain I was talking about here in Spain that looks like an elephant. Are you still there? It went silent.
I am.
Yeah, okay.
I'm trying not to talk because I know you mentioned that there's an echo. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I'm not sure why that happens, but something with StreamYard. So it's known as the elephant because it looks a lot like one, and it's got this cave that is shaped like an eye socket. It's not just a cave; it actually has the same structure as an eye socket, which is pretty odd. because it's also in the right place for an eye socket. So I just started looking at all of this as a big what if, and I got on Google Earth. Oops, hold on one second. There we go. I got on Google Earth, where you can tilt and look at things in 3D, and started looking at it, and I noticed that the eye was positioned properly, that where the head would meet the shoulders, there were curves on both sides. There was what appeared to be a spine and a rib cage. So and then this deep canyon right between where the legs would be. So like after an hour, there were already about 10 to 12 different features that I was seeing just on Google Earth that matched up with anatomy. So that was wild, because that's going beyond pareidolia, right? Where you're just seeing things from a particular angle and it looks like something. So I thought, there's no way that this can be true, but I'm just going to explore it for the fun of it and think about it using the scientific method. You know, my interesting question was, what if Titans did exist, and is there evidence for them? And so I started looking at the mountain in great detail, and got out my anatomy books and started looking at elephant anatomy and the anatomy of the eye socket, which is very unique especially in mammals, where we have all of these different bones that meet in different places known as sutures, and then there's fissures in the bones. And so I looked at at different elephant skulls as well, and you can see all these suture lines, and you can see like this particular hole. We have it here, but in elephants it's there. And yeah, so I started doing that and was absolutely blown away by what I was finding. Like this hole here happens to be exactly where that is.
Oh.
And this is looking through it.
That's crazy. It's crazy.
And the eye socket is a very interesting thing. So I got 3D rendering software and started looking in detail at it. And what I learned is that there were a whole bunch of features inside the cave. I had a laundry list of things I would expect to find if there was any truth to the idea. And so I had this list of anatomical features that I'd expect if it really was an eye socket. And so I went up with that list in mind and started taking photographs and video footage of this cave. And you can see here, this is the eye socket, not this. This is the temporal muscle, and this is where the eye would be. And there's this suture line right here that you can see here as well. And in that exact portion of the cave is this structure that even follows the same jogging line. And you can see this isn't a crack in the cave wall. It's literally overlapping stone. So, I mean, what are the odds? That's highly, highly specific. This is the optic fissure where the optic nerve goes inside the eye of the elephant. And this, in that exact portion of the cave, is this structure going down. So that's just two, right? And then this structure here that sticks up and it looks like a wave about to crash, that structure I hypothesized early on was the remains of the eyeball. It's in the exact correct place. And there were more features that exhibited that I didn't find out about until later, which I'll mention. So after one visit to the eye and, you know, some time on Google Earth, I already had about 20 anatomical features that were matching up, and they were in the right places, and some of them were highly specific. So I'm just like, okay, how is this possible? And then I hypothesized that there might be an ear canal, because there's this structure exactly where an ear would have been that you could see on Google Earth. I'll show a video clip of that in a moment. And what I didn't have any idea about was that there's actually a cave right where that arrow is pointing. And that cave had been excavated by a team of archaeologists and paleontologists, because they went in, there were skeletons, there were cave paintings. They went in and they did 3D mapping. They did 3D fly-through photography. You can see it here. And I had no idea about any of this until I went up looking for the cave, and I searched online for the name of the road that I was going to go, to find this canyon to get up closer to this structure to see if I could spot a cave. And as I did that, I discovered this work that they had done. Looking a lot like an ear canal, the spiral of a cochlea. There's cave paintings that show deluge and animals falling from the sky and four-legged creatures with horns. It's a pretty wild place. And I didn't have a clue about this until I started this investigation. So it started to feel like I'd entered the Twilight Zone. And that got me looking at the overall structure of the mountain itself and what it's made of, which I'll get to in a second. But some friends of mine, I took up there and I told them about my theories, and I thought that this might be the remains of the eyeball. And I had never noticed before in all of my trips up there, but one of them noticed that this layer here, which is the back side of that structure, was actually covered in a 10-inch thick layer of quartz. And so this was in alignment with theories that I already had about petrification, that anything that was originally fat would petrify to varying types of quartz, depending on the original composition of the tissue, and also how the petrification came about. So this structure, the whole back side of it is one big thick layer of quartz, which lined up perfectly with my theories about petrification, because the whole sclera of the backside of the eye and this chunky portion where the nerve is all just fat. Mm-hmm. And so it's just another one. There's over 50 anatomical correlations with this mountain that I've documented. And all of them I've documented on site with photographs and video, and I'm comparing it to anatomy so people can decide for themselves whether they think this is a harebrained idea or there's something to it. I'll show the list in a moment. But along the way, after I made 4 videos on the subject, the first about just an overview, the second about the eye, the third about the ear, and the fourth about the tissues of the mountain itself, I was in a live stream and I had made this discovery where Google Earth had been edited so that the eye and the ear were no longer shown. And I had all of the pre-footage because I was using Google Earth as a drone, because you're not allowed to fly drones because this mountain and the plateaus around it are a national park. So I had this before footage, and then this is the after footage. You can see the ear is no longer visible until you get in close, and now you have to get even closer because it's been edited again. So basically you can see the cave now, and you can make out that ear shape, but you have to get so close that you can't see it all in relationship to the rest of the mountain. Is there anything you'd like to ask before I continue?
Oh, I only have about 1,000 questions.
How much longer can we go?
Oh, we're good until 5.
I don't even know what time it is there. So just tell me how much is left.
4:03. You have an hour.
Okay.
A little under an hour.
All right, great. So limestone is an interesting subject matter. That's what this mountain is made of. And they're telling us that it's composed mainly of skeletal fragments of marine organisms, such as coral, forum, mollusks, endo and exoskeleton as well. And all of that has been compressed for millions of years. And that's where we get these layers of limestone from. And I started thinking about it. I was like, wow, they're literally telling us that limestone is made of bone. And I'm like, isn't that interesting? Because this mountain is also made of limestone. And so I started looking at the composition of bone. And there's 2 primary kinds of bone. You have cortical bone, which is this outer layer, which is thick and has very little in the way of holes going into it because it needs to be structurally sound. And then you have what's known as trabecular bone inside, which is this Swiss cheese kind of looking stuff. And this is what it looks like under a microscope. So interestingly enough, it looks like that with the naked eye, but also under a microscope, it looks the same. It's fractal. And that's where our blood is born. The red blood cells and everything are made inside the bones. And so if you remove the bones, then this is what it looks like here. So you have the cortical bone, which grows like rings of a tree, interestingly enough. So you get these, if this were a Titan, you would have thicker blocks of layers combined with a whole bunch of stone that looks like Swiss cheese that probably would have, I don't know, red earth, iron, and quartz, you know, if it were to petrify. And that's exactly what the structure of this mountain is. So you've got these bifurcating or branching channels. We're told that this is formed by fissures from water erosion, like acidic rain. Minerals are being eroded away from the movement of water. But it makes no sense when you see that these channels are breaking off into smaller and smaller channels. Can't possibly be water erosion. The other thing is that none of these stony bits that are found on the mountain show any signs whatsoever of having shellfish, coral, mollusk, or any skeletal fragments, right? That's odd, because that's how we're told that limestone is formed. And yet I've gone to these stones all over the mountain with a 1000x microscope and have never seen the hints of any of those things in any of these stones. And so how does something like this form through water erosion? I reject the notion. I think that that what we're looking at is biogeology. This would be an example of like the thicker blocks, and you can see the thicker layers up here. And here's an example of a chunk that's broken away, and you can see a little channel, and out of this channel has poured this red earth. The entire mountain, where it isn't limestone, is bright red earth. And a lot of these Swiss cheese structures are also covered in iron ore. So that got me looking at the composition of blood. If you start to separate the blood plasma from the red blood cells, they're red because of hemoglobin that binds to the, you know, there's iron in hemoglobin that the oxygen is binding to when we're breathing. And so isn't it interesting that blood has iron in it, and all of these stony structures are caked with iron ore. And then if you look at the plasma side, like if you centrifuge blood and you remove the plasma, what you're left with is this kind of oil, like these fish oils and salmon and almond oil. They've got that yellowy color. But if you remove all the water from it, you get what's known as human serum albumin. And when you look at these, you know, up close, they look like quartz crystal flakes. So it's just one thing after another that all lined up perfectly with this crazy theory. So I made a 6-part series called Unveiling a Titan. I talked about the first 4. The 5th one is showing, you know, the footage when we went back up there and made the discovery about the backside of what I believe is an eyeball, and then just kind of wrapping it all up in part 6. And these are the different anatomical and histological features that I've documented, and the last of them being that censorship of Google Earth. So very methodical in my approach, microscopy, aerial footage on site. I've spelunked multiple caves and filmed inside of them. And so these are, you know, this is the opposite of the problems that I've had with this kind of quote unquote research, is that nobody's doing this. And I would, you know, I welcome it. I would love to see some other investigation of other remarkable sites around the world, but it's not happening yet. So as compelling as all that might be to some of you, I have to say that there are 2 other areas of research that I've found even more compelling when it comes to the evidence in favor of them. It started with this stone, which I found in a river bottom, I don't know, going back maybe 6 years now. And I picked it up and I started looking at it, and having studied the heart anatomy a lot in school, I started to recognize that there were a bunch of anatomical features that matched a heart. And I couldn't believe it. I was like, soft tissue isn't supposed to petrify. Like the worms and the larvae should eat away at it long before it would ever have the time to petrify. And I didn't understand how it could be, but I was looking at this and I'm like, This is the aorta and the vena cava, exactly where they should be. This is the coronary artery opening. And then there's this indentation in the hearts. You'll see it in fleshy hearts in a moment, called the coronary sulcus, where the coronary artery, the widowmaker artery that causes heart attack, goes. And then between the left atrium and the left ventricle, there's typically this fatty area. So like the whole outer portion of this is white, except where it's worn and broken away, where it looks blood red. And if you get it wet, it looks like you're looking at meat. This is known as the isthmus, which is the pulmonary arteries. And you can even see the remains, I believe, of the papillary muscles here. But this is what the isthmus looks like. So already looking in the river bottom, there was at least 10 anatomical features that were specific and in the right place. So that caused me to bring the rock home and start to document it. And I got an endoscopic camera, looked at it with microscopy. I eventually had some of these stones because I found many of them. This is what the fleshy hearts look like. And you can see that fatty area that I was talking about. And this is where that coronary sulcus is. And then above and behind this is where the aorta and the vena cava would open up. So we're looking at the backside here. And there are also these lines that are known as suture lines, which are very specific, which I discovered later. And I'll get to how that happened in a moment. But once again, I was thinking of, okay, let's apply the scientific method here. If this is a real thing, and I found one, I should be able to find more. So I started going out looking for this particular pattern in the stones. And initially, I found a lot that weren't so highly specific, but were matching the same shape. And then eventually, my ability to spot them became more and more refined. And I started to recognize that there's a very repeatable, scalable pattern in the stones that shouldn't be there based on what we're told about how these formed. And what we're told is that these were clumps of clay that hardened from pressure. And that can't explain this specificity. We're told that these were part of larger structures that broke off and then eroded around in river bottoms. But if that's the case, then why would there be such a high degree of specificity that matches heart anatomy? So I started to go out into the field. I broke a bunch of them open. I made this video just looking at the insides, many of which would be white on the outside and then looking like meat on the inside. Had them CAT scanned, went in with endoscopic cameras looking at the chambers, and you can see this is what the inside of heart muscle looks like. It's not smooth like you might think. It's very bumpy. That's called trabecula carne. It's the same word that's used in the referring to the Swiss cheese bone, trabecula, right? And so how would you expect that to look if it were to petrify? It'd be bumpy, right? Not like you would expect water erosion to do. You would expect that to be smooth. So it was just one thing after another. I sliced them open, I polished them, and here you can see some of the best specimens. There's no sound there. Hold on.
Oh my gosh.
Set them, so I'm not the best of preppers. Anyway, this is a new one. So you'll have indentations on the top. And you can There's see the sulcus lines where the folds of the heart meet. This is also a new one. They taper in on the sides. Out at sunset. Because of the contraction of the heart muscle on death, rigor mortis. Got about a half a dozen of them. But this one, look at this. These are twin flames here. This one is new. Sulcus line, indentation, tapered. Another sulcus line. Same exact rock. Even down to the sulcus lines. So that's a high degree of specificity. It should, if I give you a list, indentation at the top. There's the vessels. Little aorta. And then if you get them wet, when it's wet, it just looks almost bloody. Same with this, missing a chunk, and on the inside darker red. So yeah, every once in a while I got to go out and get a little inspiration for for this stuff, but it's very repeatable. There they are, predictable. At the top, the aorta vena cava indentation. So that's a high degree of specificity, repeatability, and scalability, which is also, those are the cardinal, the cardinal signs of the scientific method when it comes to recognizing a reoccurring pattern that is actually a real pattern. There's another term called apophenia, which is like pareidolia, but it's the recognition of a false pattern, which is what they would say about these findings if geologists were to look at the conclusions. So I didn't understand how the hearts could be found outside the body, petrified. People asked me if it was some kind of a massive sacrificial ritual or something. I was like, no, that's impossible, because some of them are very, very tiny, up to multiple feet. I've got the biggest one in my office is about a foot and a half. And so I just came up with the theory, I call it boiled egg theory, that the outer portions of the body, through some cataclysmic event, whether it was plasma, volcanic activity, electrical, high heat, whatever it was, that it destroyed outer portions of the body, while the organs, which are actually all wrapped in fat and floating inside the chest and abdominal cavities, that those would harden like an egg does when you put it in water. So I just figured, I'm not going to throw out the empirical finds because I can't explain them, but eventually I had theories. So this is what happens to bone after cooking it in like a crock pot. It turns to sponge initially, and then it literally goes to gel, and then to bone broth. So that could explain the missing bones and the muscles that they were destroyed cataclysmically. So this is just a short 1-minute video I'm going to play that is summarizing the life work of a man named Francisco Torrent Guasp, who was the discoverer of the myocardial ventricular band. I didn't know about this until I was already finding the heart stones. But basically what I learned is that everything that I had learned in school about the heart was wrong. And this man proved it back in 1972, and the world still hasn't caught up with him. Cardiologists today, surgeons, are cutting into hearts, and they have not studied the true anatomy and nature of the function of the heart that this man discovered, theorized about, and then eventually proved unequivocally. But take a look at this video, because watching this documentary about this man's life story, I discovered 2 additional features in the heart stones that I hadn't even recognized because I didn't know these basics about the heart.
Did you know that almost everything you were taught about the heart is wrong? Most everyone today, even doctors, still believe the heart to be a 4-chamber pump that pushes blood through a mind-boggling 60,000 miles of narrowing blood vessels to fuel our 40 trillion cells, then filling again as if by magic on relaxation. Well, that theory was thoroughly debunked by the Spanish cardiologist Francisco Torrent Guasp back in 1972. After dissecting thousands of hearts, Guasp finally discovered the heart's true structure. The heart's far more amazing than we ever knew. It's like a rope, a long tube wrapped into a knot. Instead of being pushed, the blood is pulled through the heart in 2 spiraling vortexes. This has been proven with CAT scans, functional MRI, and positronic emission. Look at the spiraling contraction. It changes everything we know about the heart and circulation. If you'd like to know more, check out these videos.
So let me just recap. There's a lot of information there. So if you look here at this animation, you can see that the heart is literally twisting as it contracts. And that's because the heart is a vortex. Not only does the blood flow vortexually through the heart, but also, as you can see here, they proved with CAT scans that the fibers themselves are spiraling. So what you get is this dual vortex that the blood is going in opposite directions. So it really changes everything we understand about the circulatory model. And right here, see that line he's tracing? That is the meeting point when he unfolds the heart and then he brings it back together. Those are the meeting points and those were in the stones that I had already gathered, but I just saw them as
spiraling.
I saw them as creases in the rock or some erosion or something. I didn't recognize them for what they were. And then just the last thing is when you look at it from the bottom and it's doing this twist, if you look at it from the bottom, it looks like a propeller blade, and you'll see that here in a slide in a moment. But this is what the heart fibers look like. This is GWASP, and there's been so many synchronicities that have been tied to my work on these subjects, with the mountain and the heart stones alike. And one of the biggest synchronicities of all is that Francisco Torrent GWASP, and I made a video about this called Helical Hearts, Petrified Organs, and Synchronicities. He lived and worked out of his home. He had a private practice, as a general doctor, general practitioner. And he just did this in his spare time. He'd go to butchers to collect these hearts of different animals in order to dissect them and try and understand better how the circulatory system works, because it made no sense to him, the model that he was given in school when he was studying to be a cardiologist. But the interesting thing is he lived and worked his entire career on the foothills of Mont Go, which is the name of the elephant mountain that I'd been doing all this research on. So the man who made this discovery about the heart lived on the mountain that I'd been researching and documenting. So like, what are the odds of that? It's just it's astonishing. So the bottom twists like a propeller blade, and it's just mind-boggling. So what makes it compelling? It's an empirical find. It's not just a theory. Anatomical, histological specificity, repeating patterns, scalable, and predictable. And let's see, I can stop the screen share for a moment and just show you what I mean by that. Check in with you. You're still there. You haven't run away.
No, I'm just flawed. I have so many questions, but I want to ask you quickly, so you're saying that some major catastrophic event happened which caused these things to mummify, calcify, rather than decompose naturally, right? Am I right about that?
Oh, no more echo. Wonderful. Oh, that's because I'm not screen sharing. Duh.
Right.
Okay. So, yeah. So my best guess is plasma. I think that there's some kind of a major plasma event. Some call it the plasma apocalypse, the EMPCO event, which would be the electromagnetic plasma changeover event. It's been referred to by others as the Phoenix event. Archaics, you mentioned him when we were talking just before. He's talked a lot about these cyclical resets that he's documented by looking chronologically at all the world's different calendars, because the Chinese calendar is a different length from ours, and timelines don't match up. But if you look at historical texts, and when they're talking about these different cataclysmic events, you can start to line up the calendars in a way that makes sense. And so when he did that, he recognized that there was this 138-year repeating cycle of destruction that was happening in varying degrees. It could be regional, it could be continental, it could be worldwide, depending on which one they got. And and it's very interesting and compelling research. And he gets a lot of criticism from all kinds of different directions, but I've listened to a lot of his work over the years, and I think that there's at least some of what he's saying is very compelling. So my best guess is that, and I'll show some empirical reasons for that in a moment that have to do with rapid petrification. So let me just finish up with the heartstone. So if you look here, maybe you might not be able to see it in this lighting, but there's a line here.
Oh, I can see it.
Because this rock was buried in mud. And I walked up and I saw it, and I recognized immediately that it was one of these heartstones. And there's the sulcus line where it should be, and there's the indentations.
Oh my!
So I hypothesized that the other side, the front of the heart, would be faceted. Like you can see, there's like it comes up into a bump and goes down on the sides, and it goes down towards the top. So the back will be this is the faceting in the front, and the back will be either perfectly flat or concave, curving inward. You get a tapering in on the sides, and then there'll be that twist at the bottom. And then at the top, there will be, in most cases, not with this one, there will be that indentation. This is the one that was shown in the video. So that's got all of those features, the sulcus lines, the indentation. So the longer that list gets, the harder it should be for me to find a stone like that.
Right.
And I find them every day. Like just in last week, I found this one where you can see the white, where the white is broken away. It's bright red underneath. And if I got that wet right now, you would see that it looks exactly like flesh. You can see these, some of them have the veins still in them from the blood vessels. And the indentation is always at the top.
Are they from humans or are they from titans, the smaller parts?
Well, a titan would be the size of a mountain. So this would be something maybe the size of a dog or a cat or something, right? So
wow.
Like the elephant mountain is 3 miles long and 1 mile tall, roughly.
Jeez.
Right. So you like scale. We'll see with the trees in a moment, because I really want to get to some of the best footage for the trees. But you can see that twist at the bottom. These are all ones that I found just in the last week. Indentation at the top, twist at the bottom. It's highly repeatable, scalable, and my point bringing up that first one is that it's predictable, because there's been multiple times where I've seen stones that are partially buried, and I could tell which portion of the rock I was looking at, and then I predicted what the rest of the rock was going to look like. I've got a couple of videos where I've done that live, walking down a trail. There's one, pick it up, and just as I expected to find, there was an indentation at the top on the back side, because I could see the front was facing up. So it's very compelling, and I'm in touch with a guy who has a laboratory that I want to get further investigation. Tried to do that a few years back and got the runaround by some guys. I made a video called Paradigm Crushed, chronicling that adventure,
I'll have
for
to
lack
go
of a
watch
better
that.
word.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can continue just getting to the tree subject.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Go right ahead.
So
we're good on time. We have at least another 25 minutes.
Okay, I'll just fly through some stuff here. So let's see where to go.
You could have been, Carrie. I mean, we all could have been, right? Giants. How big were these titans, Mike? On an just kind of, I'm so curious, because that elephant is massive. So how big were the titans on average?
Well, I'm of the mind that reality itself is fractal and holographic. I read a book by Talbot years ago called The Holographic Universe, and it really resonated with me, because when you look at fractals and that there's this repetition of form that exists throughout nature, from the micro to the macro, it makes sense that you would have these different scales. So if a scale, if you went up a fractal level from a 3 mile long elephant, what would that look like? You might be talking about something that's 1,000 miles long. And there's a channel called Mud Fossil University. It's been around for years. He's one of the guys that I got a lot of these ideas from originally, that led me to start to look into these things and make my own discoveries. But going back to, so he talks a lot about this 1,000 mile long dragon that's in the Sahara that you can see from Google Earth. So let me just show you, there are lots of examples of rapid petrification that exist in the fossil record. Like here, for example, these are 2 fossilized brains. And interestingly enough, the brain is made of fat, and this chunk is removed, and it's exposed quartz crystal. So that is in alignment with my theories about biogeology, as are the stones that our body makes. This is gallstones, kidney stones, If organs can petrify, then we've got hundreds of lymph nodes in our body that could also be like little geodes if you if you crack them open. So that begs the question: what are geodes? And then you've got these anomalous, petrified finds. Obviously, this isn't an axe or a hammer from millions of years ago, and neither is this cowboy boot. There are lots of anomalous finds of things that shouldn't petrify, like jellyfish that are petrified in great detail. The creatures in the process of eating other creatures that are petrified. So that would suggest some kind of a very rapid cataclysmic event. So take a listen to this.
Okay. Oh, I have to add it to the stage. Sorry about that. Hold on. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so they didn't see the things I was just sharing.
I'm about to show you 5 different.
I had it.
I'll just show the images real quick, and then I'll go back to what I was going to show. So this is the hammer and the boot I mentioned. These are the different, the fatty stuff turning to quartz. One was a dolphin brain, and the other was a whale brain. And then this is very interesting.
I'm about to show you 5 different examples of rock forming quickly. Then I'm going to ask you a question about a dinosaur bone. I'm going to show at the end. From Karlovy Vary in the Czech Republic, mineralized water went through these pipes and formed this in 80 years. Here's a spark plug in stone, no more than 20 to 40 years to form this. This little guy right here was put into a mineral springs in Karlovy Vary, and within just 6 weeks, it turned to stone. And this right here, this is the same material you find in stalactites and stalagmites in those caves that they say are millions of years old. This right here took 6 months to form. Here's the question. Here's a dinosaur vertebrae. If these right here can form in that length of time, anywhere between weeks to months to years, how long does it take to fossilize a dinosaur bone?
Yeah, and did dinosaurs even exist? So this is obviously not millions of years old. That's like a drivetrain or something, or a rear differential. I'm not sure. I'm not a car guy, but clearly, things can happen a lot faster than we were taught. I don't have time to go into all these, but there's a variety of different ways that things can petrify. Artificially, there's a lake called Lake Natron in Tanzania. Creatures fall in. They get encased, and then eventually, that would go solid. This is a cave called Mother Shipton's Cave in England, where they hang things from ropes, and within 6 months, they're encased and eventually harden. So then we've got things like electricity, plasma that burn these fractal patterns into things, and the largest electrical storms in the world are found over volcanoes, and we have these things called Lichtenberg figures that are found around the world as well. We're told this is happening through water erosion, where tiny little rivulets are forming into larger and larger ones, and then forming these big channels. And that's another notion I reject. I think it's far more likely that this was formed through some kind of a plasma event. And this is the largest volcanic or plasma storm ever recorded. That's just a single volcano. Volcanic ash is very conductive. So what if hundreds of volcanoes around the world, or thousands, were going off all at the same time? What would that do? What kind of electrical storms would it cause? This is the largest Lichtenberg figure in the world. It's known as the Grand Canyon. And sunlight alone, in a matter of seconds, using a big magnifying glass called a Fresnel's lens, can literally start to melt stone. It takes literally seconds because of the intensity of the heat. So if we live under a dome, what happens if that light and power were to be focused? There's all kinds of examples of man-made petrification as well. Rubies can be made in a microwave in seconds. That's the second hardest after diamond. Petrified wood can be created in 24 hours. There was this 18th century scientist who knew how to petrify all different kinds of flesh and did so. And there's museums that have his work in them to this day, but his secret died with him. There are bog bodies, which fall into acidic bogs,
heard of those.
where the bones and the muscle are dissolved while the organs are hardened. So what would happen when the sac that is the skin breaches, those hardened organs might go out and into mud and eventually petrify into stone. Ruby can be made in a microwave, just mixing aluminum oxide and chromium oxide. And he shows this guy, Night Light in Sky, I think, or Night Hawk in Light is his YouTube channel, Night Hawk in Light. And he's just putting those powders into a votive and putting it in a microwave, and it makes raw ruby in as little as 10 seconds. So there's all kinds of stuff that has to do with petrification that we were never taught all about. And that leads us to the subject of the trees, which I want to get to with the remainder. So these are petrified acorns. These were sent to me by a subscriber. They were in a bucket outside of her house, and they turned to solid stone in 1 year because the rainwater was running off of the roof and into the bucket, and the acorns were in the bucket. People don't know this, but opal is made from tree, and it's just silica infused wood. And I'm not going to get into the why the lie, but gold. So now we're getting into the trees subject, and I'm just going to go back to find. Let's see here. Yeah, can't find the slide I was looking for, but this begs the question of what are we in, what are we on, how big is it, are there hidden lands, is that why the Antarctic Treaty exists? This is an old map that came from somewhere, I don't know where, it could be fabricated, but there's lots of different theories about the nature of this realm, but this is petrified wood, opal. This is just petrified wood here. And you can see when it's cut and polished that it still has all the beauty of fresh wood.
Yeah. Wow,
opal.
Wow.
Rainbow obsidian also comes from tree, in my opinion. This is copper in its natural state. And you can see all the micro layering of what was originally wood. There used to be petrified forests found all over the place. Those forests were harvested, and only a couple remain to this day. But the reason they were harvested is, these are from articles that are over 100 years old. They were pulling silver and gold and copper and all kinds of metals and minerals out of these petrified trees that used to be all over the place. So it was very profitable to basically grind them up and separate out their parts. This is an old map showing the Giza Plateau with what appear to be pyramids on top of tree stumps. It's just a warning about AI, that we can't trust our eyes anymore. So if you don't have actual boots on the ground footage, take everything you see with a grain of salt. So this is just a short clip. I toured with a man named Mike Alley in the Black Hills and in Colorado last year. And he's the guy for this incredible footage of the remains of the great trees. Yeah. A lot of times I couldn't tell if I was looking at stone or wood. I had to pick it up, and multiple times I was wrong.
So magnificent. Fun to be here.
Where is this again?
This is in the Black Hills of South Dakota. It's not far from Mount Rushmore.
Camera just
which was also tree.
Justice.
So you can see all the micro layering and the grains, and the sap petrifies to quartz. We're told that amber is petrified sap, but amber is only a 2.5 on the hardness scale, and you can dent it with your finger. So what would actual petrified sap look like? Oh, maybe it looks like quartz, but it doesn't have to just be white quartz. It could be all different kinds of colors, because sap can come in green and orange and red. There's, you know, probably every color of the rainbow can be found inside of trees. And so if you look at the way trees break down, this little tiny chunk here this big structure, sorry, would have been a tiny chunk inside of one of these trees. We're talking trees that were miles wide at the base.
Yeah.
And you can see all the layering, and look at the complexity. It's obviously wood.
Wow, wow.
Unless you're blinded to it. It's self-evident. They'll come up with far-fetched explanations for how this came about, but it's always trust me, bro, because they can't go back in time and see it happening, and they can't reproduce it.
Right.
But they can reproduce petrified wood in a day in a laboratory using wood. So there's that. And you can see all the beauty and the color of these sites. So yeah, we all owe a debt of gratitude to Mike Alley and the work that he did. He's got a channel called Hangman 1128. Here you can see the oxidized portion has been removed, and you can see it exposes the grain underneath. He's got different videos where he goes up and literally pulls a chunk off of one of these structures, and you can still see it, like one of these structures here. You can still see that it's fibrous inside. So a lot of times the original color remains, but when it's oxidized, it turns gray, and you get the lichen and the other stuff forming on it, like you see here. But here you can see the original color. I don't really get into aging things because I have no idea, but I suspect that it's far younger than we were taught.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, far younger. I mean, it could be, you know, tens of thousands of years, or it could be much older, and who knows. There are these different epochs that existed, and maybe, you know, it seems that there's a lot of evidence for this avatar realm, and this is just showing turquoise. It's coming.
Wow.
So gets into this question of, you know, what are geodes really? Could they be former seeds, former fruit, former stones? We grow stones inside of us. Cows and horses, they have these stones that are like the size of baseballs called bezoars, and you know, maybe that's what these concretions are, that are these multi-foot wide spheres that are stone. So how could this be missed by so many if it's true? All these things that I've shared today, expertitis, people that are just like, you know, they couldn't possibly be wrong, and they're so educated, so they're not even willing to ponder the possibility. The compartmentalization of academia, the peer review process, which is an appeal to authority that would keep out any narratives that are threatening to the, you know, whatever narratives they're supporting. Paradigm blindness, all of these things, you know, intentional obfuscation, the money aspect. If they know where things are and what they are and everyone else doesn't, they're going to have a jump on where to find the precious materials when it comes to mining. You know, and the mining evidence is on a scale that's hard to fathom around the world. This is the biggest mine in the world. You know, what are they mining? Maybe they're mining the stump of a big tree right there, you know? And this gets into now what you asked before about the salt mines. And you can see all the micro grain of the salt mine. And these are marble caves in Patagonia. These are salt mountains. And again, this is all, they're going to explain this through sedimentary layering, becoming metamorphic rock. And I would ask, how do you get concentric rings in that model? And this kind of complexity of structure from that kind of a happening. And here you can really get a taste of how amazing the salt mines are. These are in Romania and Poland. And you can see that grain up there. It looks just like the knots of trees. Is it?
Sure looks like it.
Sure looks like it. And then you get places like this that look just like straight up wood. And if you don't believe that, take a look at this.
Is that Himalayan salt?
No, this is probably sandstone, which I believe the tree petrifies to sandstone, and then that eventually becomes sand. There's a lot of ancient texts that suggest that the Sahara Desert didn't used to be there. And that it was a very fertile ground that was flooded yearly by the Nile. And if that's the case, then where'd all the sand come from? Well, maybe this is just a tiny chunk of what was once a great tree, and then it petrified into sandstone. Maybe the Great Flood, the high mineral content waters of the Great Flood, hardened this material, and then it eventually erodes, and then we get our sandy beaches and our deserts and whatnot. But some of these structures make zero sense when you look at that model, because they've got all these swirls, and all of a sudden, you know, these angles, and then it changes direction. But that's how fibers of plants grow all the time. When you look at something like this is banded iron. We're to believe that the earth did one color, then went back to white, then went to red, then went to white, and it's just alternating back and forth between these different, very distinct colors. Or was that tissue? Then you look at stuff like Petra in Jordan, and you see the insides of these carved out structures, and it sure looks like wood.
It really does.
So I think that that there's a lot that's been hidden from us. This is just talking about amber. Then you start to look at the really big structures of the biggest mountains on Earth with new eyes, and maybe those are tree stumps. Maybe they weren't all cut down. Maybe some were like broken because of incredible cataclysm. And that's why you get these jagged things that look just like tree stumps. So I'm of the mind that quartz is sap. Guess where they find gold? They go looking in quartz seams, and they find them in gold and silver veins. And you can see here, it's very clearly the knot of a tree. So they tell us the biggest petrified tree in the world has a diameter of 8 feet. This is clearly wood. You have to be blind not to see it, in my opinion. Paradigm blind.
Yeah.
And, you know, that gets into all the different colors of sap and the myriad of different kinds of trees that exist. There's examples of tree sap that is rich in metals, which they say the tree is pulling from the ground, but it might be that the tree itself is making the metal. Then you get these waterfalls that are coming out of trees. Well, imagine if that was miles wide. What would the channel that water is going through look like? Might it look like something like this? There's some guys named the Action Adventure Twins.
I've been seeing so many videos of that. What accounts for that water? Is that water? Is it underground?
Yeah, it's tapping into the primary waters below. Well, primary would be like the waters of the deep, but it's tapping into some water flow there. And, you know, that begs the question, like, if this was once a tree, which many people consider to be an absurd idea, I just see it as one of many data points, right? How many different little bits of evidence have I given now, apart from the stumps, that suggest that those trees might have once existed? These guys, the Action Adventure Twins, they'll go 500 feet down through one of these channels, and then it snakes off in a little, you know, channel, and then they go down another 500 feet. It is absolutely crazy what these guys are doing, but it looks very biological, which begs the question, what are lava tubes? We're told that's formed by lava, but you have rings going this way, and then you have lines going horizontal. How can it do both? And how does lava carve channels that bifurcate? There's just a lot of question marks when it comes to lava tubes, and I think they may be the remains of the formal root structures. And more evidence of that are these tepuis, which have these never-ending waterfalls, which are clearly not coming from rainfall. And how is that water being pumped up? Where is it coming from? Well, they just happen to call them artesian wells. It's coming up from well below, the waters of the deep, getting pushed up through what may be the original root structures of these trees, if that was once a tree. So again, keep an open mind. I think the answer is probably all of the above with this stuff.
Yeah.
A lot of people want to over apply their pet theory to things. There's a lot of videos that people can check out on my channel. Some of my best work has been done in live streams where I break down a lot of these different individual topics and go deeper into each of them. And yeah, so biogeology, titanology, Titan Mountains, Heartstones, all of that stuff, there seems to be pretty compelling evidence in favor of these things, none of which we're ever taught about in school.
No. Mind blown, I got to tell you. That was spectacular,
Thank you.
that presentation. And it's like you said, you're using empirical evidence and research to back up. I mean, you're feet on the ground, you're doing the digging. The heart stuff blew me away. I think every time I see a rock now, I'm going to look at it absolutely with a different pair of eyes.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah, I really recommend people go deep into the videos to see more of the evidence, and because they start to get the hint that, oh wow, maybe geology was biology, but in a far more direct way than we were taught. And then suddenly everything is that to them. And so, they'll be holding up some random rock and start making all kinds of claims about it. That was one of the things I really disliked about Roger from Mud Fossil University. He had some compelling information, but there were other times where he was pointing at stuff and just making steadfast 100% claims about what he was pointing at. And I'm looking at it with a background in anatomy going, I don't see it,
Yeah.
So that was why I approached all of this very differently. And he's, never done any boots on the ground work and gone to these sites. He's older, so that may be part of it. But you can only do so much through a screen. You got to get out there and interact with it, hold it in your hand, examine it with microscopes and telescopes and whatever else. Drones.
Your ability for pattern recognition is mind-blowing too.
Thank you.
This is just, I'm like,
I could be wrong about it all.
I don't think you are. This is like amazing evidence. And it really causes us to rethink so much of what we've been. And I think it's great because people will now go look up this stuff and start doing their own legwork and evidence. I mean, I think that's awesome.
Yeah, that's a hope.
Yeah.
That something like that would happen. I would have thought by now, because I started making videos on the subject about 8 years ago.
Yeah.
Maybe seven or 8. And, more and more has fallen in my lap. Many of my subscribers, one of them in the chat right now, hey Derp, he sent me all kinds of things that I didn't know about, so it's been like a grassroots open source investigation. Yeah. I'm kind of the spearhead of it when it comes to giving these presentations, but I've learned a lot from other people along the way. So
two questions. Are you going to teach classes on this? And B, will you please come back? Because there's so much more for you to talk about. I would love to have you back again.
Yeah, happy to come back. I don't know, at some point I may get an honorary PhD in titanology or biogeology or something if they ever become ologies. So. But I have no intention of starting a school. I just don't, the amount of work that goes into creating a curriculum and that. So that's why I've pursued my interests and the things that were exciting to me and decided, I knew early on that there was no way these ideas would penetrate academia because they're far too radical and require too much has to be thrown out for these things to be true.
Yeah.
And peer review is an appeal to authority. It's by nature a logical fallacy where you've got gatekeepers that are holding the strings to things. So I think that it was much better to just give this stuff away, and that's what I've done. And at some point I'll probably write a book about it, and
That would be awesome.
But
that would be awesome.
in the meantime, The Hacker Prince is available, and if you like all this stuff, it's an incredible story that I highly recommend people check out. Whether you're a tech lover or not, it's a very exciting tale that is true and required no embellishment. So.
Yeah, I've heard you talk about that in some detail. I think when you come back, we could take a little bit of time, because you of yourself are a legend and truly fascinating human being. So, Mike, we're so grateful to you. I have to email you to come back, because I have so many questions, and I know you have a lot more for us to dig into here. And I know folks in the chat are flipping out over it. I'm so sorry I couldn't get to your comments and questions.
For your listeners, if you do go to my channel and watch stuff, please comment, and obviously subscribe to it as well. The channel has been heavily algorithmed. If you look at the original videos I made and the kinds of numbers and everything, they haven't censored me, but they've gone,
Yeah.
So
of course, they shadow ban. They do what they do. Yeah, I'll have the link, of course, to where you can pick up Mike's book. I'm going to order one myself today. I had like 3 other books behind me I had to finish first, but I will definitely read it. Your life story is truly amazing. And words can't express the gratitude for what you've taken the time to teach us today. I am mind blown. I'm not often left speechless, but that presentation was amazing.
Thank you so much for inviting me on, and you're a very gracious host. And
thank you.
It's been fun talking with you and your audience. And hopefully some of this stuff will sink in and at least cause people to look at things through different eyes. I've had a lot of people who've thanked me over the years for really altering their perceptions of reality. One person once said, your videos are more powerful than psychedelics because they don't wear off.
Yes.
So it's like, careful, you might end up with my mania, whatever that is called. I don't know what.
Yeah, and it's like drugs. You just want more and more and more of it. Like, instead of watch TV, I'm just watching your YouTube from now on. That's it.
I haven't had cable for 30 years, so maybe that's why I have so many interesting ideas. I haven't been brainwashed by the mainstream ones. So yeah, kill your television.
Yes, I will be in touch with you, because we're definitely going to book another show. Thank you, Mike.
Sounds fun.
Truly a privilege and a pleasure. I will be in touch soon. Thanks. And thank you, everyone in the chat. We have just under a minute left, just to show my gratitude to you all. I love all the comments and questions. You can always copy and paste them into the YouTube channel. I'm sure Mike, when he has some free time, would be more than happy to answer them. Mike, this conversation has certainly redefined the scale of history, at least in my eyes, and the very meaning of geology. Like I said before, I am going to be looking at everything with a different pair of eyes, and I thank you for that. So whether you accept the premise of a biogeology and titans, or you think it's some audacious alternative history, it's worth a look at, and it's worth to question. Are these mountains really mountains? I guess I should stop blabbering. I could go on and on and on. And I also want to thank United Public Radio Network and the UFO Paranormal Radio Network, which is 105.3 on the Gulf Coast and 107.7 FM in New Orleans. Please join us all the time. Subscribe. I greatly appreciate it. God bless all of you. Thank you. See you next Wednesday. Bye-bye, everyone.